Before the video begins, I'd like to make a note that the majority of information you will hear at the start regarding Yoselyn Ortega's life and mental health leading up to October 25th, 2012, was derived from her statements to psychologists and her family's testimonies throughout trial. It is up to you, the viewer, to decide how much of it you find to be credible. Yoselyn Ortega was born on May 1st, 1962, in the Dominican Republic and was the second youngest of 8 siblings. When she was a child, her parents owned a bodega where it is said that her siblings and she would work from the moment they could walk and talk. The family had a comfortable life, and the children did not go without. It wasn't until Yoselyn was 16 years old that she would begin to experience troubles in her life. In 1978, her 12-year-old younger sister Rosa would pass away suddenly from a brain aneurysm, and following this event, Yoselyn would suffer her first major depressive episode, where it is said that she did not leave her house for a year. Throughout this depression, she would experience constant headaches and told family members that she had begun to hear voices. The voices would command her to hurt herself and others, but she ignored them and never did as they said. When at their most intense, Yoselyn would say that it sounded like the voices were originating from a source outside of her mind, sometimes so loud they would wake her from her sleep, and then continue screaming and yelling as she went about her waking life. Accompanied by the auditory hallucinations, she would say that she had begun to experience visual ones, humanoid-shaped shadow people, whom she described as the devil. They would follow her around and talk to her. Yoselyn never sought treatment for this, as it is said that between the years of 1962 and 1982, in the Dominican Republic, mental health was largely seen as an inescapable condition of the loco, meaning crazy. Fearing what would happen to her if she told a doctor about this, she kept it to herself and some family members whom she trusted, continuing to live her life as best she could. In 1985, she graduated from university with an accounting degree and moved to New York, where one of her sisters lived in an apartment. In 1995, Yoselyn gets married and gives birth to a son whose name is Jesus. The marriage is rocky and the relationship does not work. So in 1999 they divorce, and Yoselyn returns to her family in the Dominican Republic to raise her son there. Yoselyn wishes to better provide for her son, and believes that she can make more money back in the United States. So not too long after arriving, she leaves her 4-year-old child in the care of her sister, and returns to New York looking for work. Moving back into the small apartment with her other sister, she works in factories and as a cleaning lady over a number of years, and becomes a naturalized citizen of the States in 2004. Whilst she is away from her son, she does stay in touch and contacts him every day, visiting him 4 to 5 times a year. In 2008, she decides to move back to the Dominican Republic to look after him full-time. In April of 2008, a close friend of Yoselyn's shoots himself in the head, ending his life on the balcony of her childhood home. This event greatly rattles her, and she sinks into the depths of another intense depressive state. Her son recalls that through this time, she had become so paranoid of everything, especially violent crime, that she would not let him leave the house outside of going to school. In addition to this, whenever a dog would bark, Yoselyn would force him to hide under his bed out of fear of criminals. She tells one of her friends that whenever she leaves the house, she hears voices commanding her to go back inside. Not doing well at all, one of her sisters again begins to be the main caretaker for her son, and Yoselyn returns to the United States. It is in the years following that she is to meet the Krim family. Krim, an ex-football star Harvard grad, and Marina Krim, a high-achieving graduate from the Southern University of California and creative entrepreneur, had originally met each other at an Italian restaurant in Venice Beach and would form a strong relationship, getting married in 2003. The couple would have their first child, whose name is Lucia, in 2006, and their second, Nessie, in 2009. When their third child was on the way, in 2010, the family would move to New York for Kevin's career, who was at the time working as an executive in CNBC's digital media division. The family moved to one of the more idyllic neighborhoods in Manhattan, only a block away from Central Park, and some of the apartments in this area costing up to $18,000 a month in rent. Kevin's work days were long, and he would travel frequently, leaving Marina alone for extended periods where she would do all of the housekeeping and looking after the children. Marina, on top of doing all of the household duties and looking after 2 young children, would also work part-time teaching weekly art classes. Marina ran a blog which documented the lives of her children, aptly titled Life with the Little Krim Kids, and the family was known to be very happy, creative, and pleasant people. With their 3rd child on the way, and with Kevin working a lot, they had begun to discuss the idea of hiring a nanny to help out around the house, particularly with pickups and drop-offs after school, as both of their children would need to be in different places at the same time. With a 3rd on the way, it would all be impossible for Marina to handle this alone. The area that they lived was home to many affluent families, and the presence of a nanny was not uncommon within these households. In 2010, a heavily pregnant Marina is at a dance studio with her daughters. She is approached by a woman named Celia, a nanny for another family. Celia says that it looks like the mother needs help, as she can see another child is imminently on the way, and that she knows someone whom she'd like to put their name forward for the job of nanny. Marina is interested, and asks the woman to send her a resume so that she can look over her experience. Later that week, the Krims receive a reference via email for Celia's 48-year-old sister, Yoselyn Ortega. The email details Yoselyn's previous work as a nanny and is rather impressive. The glowing reference outlines work with another family and their son, and based on this, Kevin and Marina decide to bring Yoselyn in for an interview and a trial. Unknown to them, the reference is completely falsified, written by Yoselyn's niece, who does not have any children at all. Nor did Yoselyn have any experience being a nanny, which it stated that she did. Despite not having the experience, Yoselyn does well in her interview, which sees the Krims hiring her to work as their part-time nanny. Her hours would be 25 a week, paid in cash at $18 an hour, and it would mostly be afternoon work for pickups and drop-offs. Yoselyn is incredibly happy to be working with the family, and says that she is grateful for the pay they offered her and the way that she is treated. In addition to what the Krims pay her, they would also give her gifts, such as an Ann Taylor jacket, or purchasing plane tickets for her to visit her family back in the Dominican Republic, whilst they were away themselves on vacation. Marina gives birth to a son, and they name him Leo, with the newest addition to their family seamlessly fitting into their lives. In her blog, the mother would continue to document special moments with her children, both big and small. Quote, "One of the best parts of my day is after I drop both girls off at school and have 3 precious hours with little Leo all to myself. Okay, I'm near getting cheesy. I adore this boy so much. He's obsessed with collecting acorns he finds on the floor. He loves riding the school bus, and he happily plays by himself for long periods of time. Here he has set up his kitchen in the living room and is making bacon. Not sure where he learned the word bacon." End quote. In February of 2012, the Krims would travel with Yoselyn to her home country to meet their nanny's family. They paid for the entire trip, and on one night even stayed in Yoselyn's family home. The trip was said to have been very joyous, and Marina would write about it on her blog, saying that it was lovely to meet her Dominican Republic family. The Krim children were said to have loved Yoselyn. Their youngest Leo would at times have trouble falling asleep in her absence. Lucia would make drawings and give them to the nanny, and overall it was said that Yoselyn treated these children like her own. Her family at times lovingly joked that she actually had 4 kids, not 1. It is said that the Krims were especially kind to her son Jesus, giving him gifts such as an iPad, and eventually, when he would come over to live in New York with his mother, the Krims would pay him to dog sit when they went away, letting him sleep in their bed during these times. Kevin would talk to the young man about his future and sports, and Jesus would say about Kevin, quote, "He was a very busy man, but he made time to talk to me. I appreciated that. It was something I very much appreciated." End quote. In April of 2012, tensions would flare between Yoselyn and her sister, and as a result, Yoselyn would get her own apartment in the Bronx, leaving the place that she'd spent almost 30 years living in during her times in New York. One of Yoselyn's neighbors from the family apartment would say that one morning Yoselyn knocked on her door and excitedly told her that she was leaving the building. She was absolutely ecstatic to be moving away. In June of 2012, her son Jesus, who was a senior in high school, moved from the Dominican Republic to live with his mother in her place in the Bronx. Now that she had a place of her own, she felt that she had enough space for him to be able to live comfortably with her. The plan was for him to complete high school in the US and then apply for college. Unfortunately, the public schooling system required he repeat year 11. And to avoid this, Yoselyn placed him into private schooling, which cost her $7,500 initially. This was a big, unexpected hit to her finances, and made life for her much more difficult than she had anticipated. This was the first time in her life that Jesus was exclusively under her care, and the financial situation was becoming dire, as rent and the cost to support herself and a 17-year-old boy was mounting. Yoselyn eventually moved back to her sister's family 3-bedroom apartment, where she and Jesus lived with 4 others. Having 6 people living in this small place, the situation was described as overcrowded and stressful, and Yoselyn was devastated to lose her own place. Eventually, Yoselyn asks her boss Marina for more money, and the Krims agree to pay her more if she is to perform more duties. For an extra 5 hours of house cleaning a week, they would give her an additional $100. Yoselyn accepts the offer, and as well, picks up extra work whenever she can babysitting, selling jewelry and makeup to people in her apartment, and cooking meals for parties. Some of her neighbors say that she had begun to become incredibly overworked, being out of the house for over 12 hours at a time each day, and when they did see her, she would complain about how tired she was and how much work she had to do. Marina was aware that her nanny was struggling financially and recommended Yoselyn to friends that needed babysitting. It is said that these offers of extra work enraged Yoselyn, and she had begun to resent her boss. She believed that this extra workload of house cleaning and friends babysitting was taking time away from her son, and she was losing control over everything in her life. The resentment that she held for her boss was kept to herself, and she did her best to maintain a professional attitude when at work, only disclosing her feelings of anger to those close to her. As described by friends, Yoselyn was mentally unraveling. She was barely eating and lost a lot of weight. Looking gaunt and frail, her family members would recall her weeping frequently. She no longer happily greeted people or friends like she used to. She no longer listened to music, and the energetic, charming woman that people had come to know her to be was a distant memory of someone no longer present. Yoselyn was suffering from insomnia, and would begin to speak cryptically about shadow figures and voices who were trying to divide her family, and would even say that she was losing her mind to demonic possession in her cramped little room. Every night, she said that she would see shadowy figures of people running around the room, saying things like they were going to cut her throat, and that they were going to get her. She spends almost all of her free time in this room, and her sister can hear her praying constantly, asking God to take away the things that she was feeling in her body and mind. Yoselyn does not tell her employers, the Krims, about her deteriorating mental health, as she is fearful that she may lose her job, and so continues to work as best she can. On Labor Day weekend of 2012, Yoselyn is recommended to work for one of Marina's friends for a few extra days, as her friend was on bed rest. After doing one day's work, Yoselyn returns the next day with a friend, saying that she can no longer perform the duties, and her friend will take over. Marina's friend is unhappy with this situation and refuses the offer. Following this, she tells her friend of what had happened, and Marina is not happy with the news. The following day at a school drop-off, Marina angrily says to Yoselyn, within earshot of many other people, "I don't want to see your face right now." Yoselyn feels as though this was aimed to humiliate her, and feeling insulted, she would sit on a park bench, crying with her head in her hands, saying to herself, "What did I do wrong? I did everything for her. How is it that I am taking care of her kids, and you're ignoring me after I've been with you for 2 years doing everything, even washing your underwear?" Yoselyn's work performance continues to slip, and Marina warns her, if she cannot improve, they will need to replace her. By this stage, Yoselyn says that she was critically suffering mentally, and there are 4 instances reported by family members, which document some rather troubling behaviour. The first being when Yoselyn was visiting a friend. She was said to have fainted, like she lost consciousness, but her eyes stayed open. Another instance, it was as though her knees buckled as she walked, falling unconscious, again with her eyes open. The third instance, her sister had awoken one morning around 4 a.m. to Yoselyn banging her head against the wall and plucking her own hair out. She was crying and saying things such as, "I want to go back to the way I was before." And the fourth, Yoselyn was found to be throwing pots and pans around the family apartment for reasons unknown. Yoselyn makes an appointment to see a psychologist on the 22nd of October, and throughout this 45-minute session, she does not mention any of her symptoms of psychosis. Instead, the psychologist says that she focused on talking about her high stress and anxiety related to work, her relationship with her son, and deep feelings of failure regarding her ability to provide for him. The psychologist says that his impression of her was one of a very worried, anxious, and frightened woman, but not one suffering from hallucinations or psychotic episodes. October 24th. Marina scolds Yoselyn for not interacting enough with the children whilst she is looking after them, and for feeding them junk food against her wishes. Yoselyn goes home that night and takes a lot of pain medication for a severe headache. She speaks with her sister and asks her to take good care of her son, to raise him well, and let him know that she loves him dearly. The next morning, on October 25th, Jesus goes to school, and Yoselyn confirms that he made it onto the bus okay via a text message. This is the last recorded text or phone call that this device makes. Before she leaves the house herself, Yoselyn hangs a purse on the door of her sister's room. The purse contains family heirlooms, pictures of their deceased mother, and her mother's passport and social security card, a chain belonging to her mother, alongside a broken ring and earring, Jesus' baby teeth, with pictures of him as a baby as well, and photos of her sisters, all as children. Yoselyn also visits a neighbour and gives her an envelope addressed to her sister. Inside is her debit card, her license, 2 insurance cards, her passport and social security card, a blood donor card, bank papers, and $100. The neighbour would say that Yoselyn scared her during this interaction, as she was speaking about a black shadow that was stalking her, leading to the neighbour thinking, quote, "My God, this woman is crazy," end quote. As Yoselyn spoke to her, she was gnashing her teeth and her eyes were frantically darting from side to side. She was constantly pacing back and forth, and the communication is described as if one were speaking to a demon. Yoselyn needed to be at work at 3 p.m. at the Krim's residence, and after this visit with her neighbour, she makes her way there by train. When she arrives, Marina tells her the plan for the afternoon. Yoselyn was to take 2-year-old Leo with her to collect 6-year-old Lucia from school. Then she would walk Lucia to ballet class and drop her off, from there taking Leo home so that he can nap. Marina at this time would be taking 3-year-old Nessie to a swim class, and after that, the two would go and pick Lucia up at 5 p.m. from ballet, returning home together. Yoselyn leaves with Leo as intended and collects Lucia from school, but instead of taking her to dance, she makes her way to Central Park and gets ice cream for the 2 children. Marina leaves the house at 4 p.m. with her other daughter, and Yoselyn can be seen on CCTV footage just before 4 p.m., returning to the apartment with the 2 children. As she enters the building, she asks the doorman, "Is the mother home?" The doorman responds that she had just left, and he notes that this was a very strange interaction, as for the entire 2 years that he knew her as the nanny for the Krims, she never had uttered a word to him. In the elevator on the way up to the apartment, a neighbour recalls seeing the children with their nanny. She says that the young girl was in high spirits, dancing around and excitedly telling her that she'll be going to dance later on. Once Nessie's swim class finishes, Marina and the child head to the ballet studio to collect Lucia. Upon arriving, Marina is informed that the child never made it to dance. Marina immediately fears that something is wrong, because Yoselyn had always been incredibly reliable. She texts the nanny, "Where is Lulu?" and there is no response. She texts again, this time in Spanish. "Where are you?" 20 minutes later, having no response, she messages one more time. "Where are you?" An incredibly concerned Marina bolts home with her daughter. Arriving at the apartments, she rushes up to her place, heads inside, and calls out for her children. Leo's stroller and Lucia's dance bag can be seen, but she gets no response from anyone. Confused and worried, she rushes back down to the doorman to ask if he knows where they are. The doorman tells Marina that he hadn't seen the nanny leave with the kids since they returned home about an hour ago. So Marina goes back up to the apartment, and this time begins to look through each room. Quote, "It's like a total horror movie. I walk down the hall, and I see the light on under the door. I walk down the hall, and I'm like, oh God, it's so quiet in here. Oh God, why is it so quiet? And I open the door, and oh God, I see Lulu. I knew that she was dead. She's lying in the bathtub, and her eyes were open. I see Leo next to her. They had blood on them. Then I see Yoselyn, blood all over her, and her eyes bugging out. All I remember saying to her is, I hate you. I remembered screaming, and it was a scream you can't imagine is even inside of you. I don't even know where it came from. I just thought, I'm never going to be able to talk to them ever again. They are dead. I just saw my kids dead." End quote. Her 2 children were placed in the bathtub facing forward with their eyes open, and Yoselyn stands next to them with blood all over her. As soon as she sees Marina react to the children, she plunges a knife deep into her throat, breaking 2 of the bones in her own neck. Marina grabs her daughter Nessie and rushes her out of the apartment, then back into the landing where she collapses and is hysterically screaming. A neighbor who witnesses Marina in this moment would say, quote, "I heard blood-curdling screams, and I went down to the lobby, and there was the mother screaming, hunched over the 3-year-old. At times she was screaming things like, 'I'll never speak to her again,' repeating that over and over again. Then she would say, 'It's all right, you'll be all right,' to the child. Then she would get waves of the reality of what just happened, and then she'd go into just plain blood-curdling screams, with her arms flailing out to the sides." End quote. The doorman calls 911, and the superintendent of the building, Michael Minahan, rushes up to her apartment to see what has happened. When he discovers the scene, he says, quote, "Ortega was staring into the bathroom mirror. Blood was pouring from a gash in her throat. I could see the tub, and I could see, I would say, bodies or clothing, or something. I couldn't bear to look at the bodies. All I could see was blood. I did my best to not take my eyes off Miss Ortega. When she turned to look at me, she had eyes of the devil." End quote. Michael rushes back out of the apartment after Yoselyn turns to look at him, and he slams the door shut behind him. From the hallway, he barricades it and holds it tightly closed until police arrive. The first responding officer sees the superintendent holding the door and says, quote, "His face was white. He was sweating and he was holding the door shut with his 2 hands and his foot. He said to me, 'Whatever is behind that door is pure evil.'" End quote. Officers draw their weapons and enter the apartment, securing it room by room until they get to the back bathroom last. When they enter, Yoselyn is lying on the floor on her back, eyes closed and breathing slowly, a bloodied knife next to her and another in the sink. One officer begins to remove the children from the bathtub and says that there was so much blood, he was fearful that the child would slip from his hands. As they are removing the children, the officers fear that the wounds to their necks are so deep they could be decapitated. And as the children are being taken from the room, they take note that Yoselyn silently lays on the floor and watches their movements. The children were cold and had no pulse, but an attempt to desperately revive them is made. It is futile though, and everyone who saw the children said that they knew they were gone. The 2 children are rushed to hospital and pronounced dead when they arrive, and Marina is also taken in another ambulance with her daughter. Upon arriving, she is unable to be calmed and is sedated. Staff members recall her being in such shock she was unable to communicate with anyone. At this very time, her husband Kevin was returning on a flight from San Fran and had no idea what was happening. When he lands in JFK Airport, He begins to receive text after text from friends and family asking him what had happened. The crew of the plane announced that NYPD needs to pull someone off, and Kevin is escorted out. He says that from listening to his voicemails, one being from his wife who was only screaming and barely recognizable, he knew something had happened to his children. He was just unsure which child and what. As he is walking to the exit of the airport, he collapses, and the two officers with him help him up. Kevin could not remember if he walked out of the airport or was carried out, and only learned the full extent of what had happened after getting to the hospital and meeting with his wife. Yoselyn is also taken to another hospital at around 6 p.m. They find superficial slash wounds to her wrists, and she undergoes multiple surgeries to stabilize her neck and spine. These surgeries leave her delirious when she is conscious, and she is also placed on antipsychotic medications. When not in surgery, Yoselyn is handcuffed to her bed and has an officer watching over her in the room. The children both sustained multiple stab and slash wounds. Leo, the smallest, had 5 wounds and looked as though he was stabbed from behind with his throat being slit. Lucia had many more injuries. 30 stab and slash wounds, all being inflicted haphazardly over her body, which would indicate a violent struggle as she fought for her life. The medical examiner would say that both children died from blood loss, and it would have taken minutes with them realizing what was happening, as their bodies drained of their blood. Here is a quote from their father, Kevin, as he speaks about the final moments with his children's bodies. Quote, "We got to some room. Lulu and Leo were lying on some tables. You know, hospital beds or whatever, covered in sheets up to their chins, and they looked beautiful and strange. I mean, they were the wrong color. They didn't have any blood left in them, so they were bluish. They still had this perfect skin, their long eyelashes, and their eyes were closed. They had this sandy brown hair that was kind of lightish, and you could see that the hospital staff tried really hard to wash the blood out. But there was still a kind of auburn tint to it that I remember to this day, and I got down on my knees and I said, 'I'm sorry.' I said, 'I love you,' and I kissed him. Said goodbye, and it's worse than you imagine. It's worse." End quote. When Yoselyn wakes up after her final surgery, she manages to communicate for the first time since the attack. Unable to speak because of intubation, she motions for the attention of the officer in her room. Yoselyn is provided with an alphabet board where she spells out a message. Quote, "I had to do everything and take care of the kids. I worked as babysitter only, and she wanted me to do everything. She wanted 5 hours of cleaning every week. My schedule every day is different. Boss Marina every day has different schedule for me." End quote. Yoselyn is arrested for 2 counts of first-degree murder. A month following the arrest, her team enters a defense of not guilty by reason of mental defect or disease, and Yoselyn undergoes a multitude of psychological evaluations by experts for both the defense and the state. Throughout many of these interviews, and for years following, she blames Marina for what happened to her children, and for many of the problems which were occurring in her life at the time. The state would argue that Yoselyn hated Marina very much. She despised the idea that her boss thought more work was something that she could handle, and was very upset that Marina would even bring this up as an option, believing that the wealthy family should have bumped up her pay without adding any extra duties. Her feelings of inadequacy surrounding her own ability to provide for her son increased. As this happened, so too did her resentment for Marina grow. She had become so jealous that Marina was able to give her children a life that she could never give to Jesus. She would find herself focusing on the idea that the extra work given to her was directly tied to the suffering of her son, thus spiraling her down a path of rage and hate. Feelings of inadequacy relating to her ability to provide for her son increased. Her hatred for Marina would be most prominent in the moment where she waited for the mother to open the bathroom door, observed her horrified reaction to what is a parent realizing that her children had been butchered, and only then, once witnessing Marina's pain, did she attempt to take her own life and avoid responsibility for her crimes. The state says that there was a clear plan for the murders. If not, why was she biding her time in Central Park, avoiding a path that she knew Marina would walk? Why were the bodies carefully placed so that Marina would see them when she entered the room? If this woman had truly lost her mind, how was it that she was able to execute such precise actions? Prosecutors also put forward the idea that if the devil took over her body, as she claims it did, and she has no memory of the attack whatsoever, as she claims she doesn't, then why, when she woke up, her first thoughts were to explain and justify her actions, not question where are the children that she was caring for, children that she claims to love. She never asked why it was that she had found herself in hospital, why she were handcuffed, or anything along the lines of, what is happening right now? The state would ask the question, why did Yoselyn not cry throughout the trial? If she loved the Krim family and their children, how is it possible that she did not cry through the heartbreaking testimonies of both Krim parents? There were times during testimony where people would talk about how Yoselyn was treated well. She could be seen mouthing the word no and shaking her head in defiance as she listened along. The state also argues that although she had many problems leading up to the attack, stress and anxiety being the most intense, psychosis was not one. They say that all of the hallucinations and voices were made up. Their evidence to support this would point to the fact that she had not seen a mental health professional in over 30 years, even after coming to America, where, although not perfect, did not view mental health in such a taboo way as it was in her home country. The prosecutors would find it suspicious that all of her friends and family who knew of her psychotic symptoms only came forward to talk about them after the defense of insanity was submitted, months after the attack, none of them warning the Krims about any of this. A rather bizarre moment would occur during the trial, when a recording was played, an interview between Yoselyn and the expert psychologist for the state. After Yoselyn's team had been claiming insanity for months now, and her openly talking about her symptoms with psychologists for the defense, in the state's first evaluation, this would happen. Quote, "Any recollection of hearing a voice or voices telling you to kill the children? No. Ever? No. I loved the children very much. A lot. So you never received any instruction or voices that today's the day to kill the children? No. You never saw a devil? No. Had a visual image of the devil? No. Did you experience seeing men in black appearing? No." End quote. Whilst answering these questions, her brow was knitted, as though the expert were the one whom crazy for asking such questions. Although in itself, this looks like solid evidence in the state's favour, the defence would argue that her denial here is indicative of her insanity, as she was directly denying any claims of mental illness long after her attorneys submitted a defence of insanity. They would say this is consistent with her minimising her mental disorders, and would call it patchy amnesia. The state, on the other hand, would call it convenient amnesia. The defense would argue that there was no planfulness to this attack. It was a moment of lost control due to psychosis, arguing that psychosis doesn't always look like a person lost to their own mind, flailing their limbs and babbling like an idiot. They say it can look calm, calculated, and in control, even when the person has lost all control. They would put forward her family's long history of mental disorders and suicides, and state that when she awoke from her surgeries, she was heavily medicated. Therefore, nothing she said in that moment should be considered with any degree of seriousness. Her defense team would accentuate her fear regarding how people perceive mental health, being afraid of losing her job above all else. She didn't even tell the psychologist days before the attack, because if she did, she believed that he would view her as irreversibly crazy. The defense would put forward the idea that the leaving behind of family heirlooms and personal belongings, although a troubling sign, is not hard proof that she was going out and planning to kill the children. It was more a sign that she was planning on taking her own life. Most of the information that you heard earlier in the video regarding her hallucinations leading up to the attack and through her childhood was all derived from witness testimony, family members and friends who would tell the jury under oath that these are things they saw and heard regarding her life. Those details are what the defense would heavily lean on to build and present their case. Another strange little piece that cropped up throughout the trial was during her son's testimony. He would claim that at 1:30 p.m, He received a phone call from his mother's telephone. When he answered, a man with a strange and heavy accent whispered to him, "I need help," then abruptly ended the call. Phone records do not support this at all, and the state would highlight that fact. With both sides resting their case after 6 weeks of trial, the jury would come to the decision that Yoselyn Ortega was guilty of 1-count first-degree murder and another of second-degree murder. Sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole, at her sentencing, Yoselyn would have a chance to speak.
I'm very sorry for everything that happened. But I hope that no one goes through what I have gone through. Although many people wish me all the worst, my life is in the hands of God. I am in jail. But perhaps there are many more that are more in prison than I am. I ask for a great deal of forgiveness to God, to Marina, to Kevin. I wish my family, I told my family that I did not feel well. At one time when I was walking, I had Lulu. I told Lulu, I don't feel good. And she would say, what's wrong? I have to go to the doctor. I went to the doctor. He gave me another appointment. He said, if you don't come, they're going to charge you $10. I told Marina, I didn't tell her that it was through the doctor, but I told her I had an appointment. But she had another appointment. And I was not able to go. I really feel it deep in my soul. And to the DA, may God bless him for everything he wishes me. And everything he has done, but God is up there.
I would like to point out that at this stage of the video, I have transitioned away from research and now speak from my own personal thoughts regarding the case. One will never know with 100% certainty if Yoselyn experienced these hallucinations and voices that she told people of. Through researching the case, and more importantly the trial, I found myself jumping between whether I believed it or not. It makes sense to me that someone in her position, experiencing the symptoms of psychosis that she was, may be more inclined to hide that from certain people around her. Yet it also makes equal sense to me that she could have been, at least near the end of the timeline there, a jealous, hateful, and dangerous individual who found herself driven by rage and revenge, someone who believed that her son would have a better life without her, and one who was going to take down the woman who could have fixed everything for her. In this headspace, one could have seen Yoselyn viewing Marina as the evil one, which through some roundabout mental gymnastics enabled her to commit such a horrendous crime against the family, leaning on the insanity defense to excuse the inexcusable. I can't comment too much more on who she is as a person, as all of the reports I'd found documenting her life and struggles did come from her. This case did make me wonder though about the expert witnesses used in trials. How when the defense is insanity, or when trying to prove mitigating factors to avoid a death penalty, a battle of expert witnesses takes place, clearly intelligent people with credentials backing them up, both sides using the same set of facts to come to completely opposing conclusions regarding that person's mental state. It really brings me to a point where I question the entire practice and wonder if expert witnesses shouldn't be hired by each side, but instead a panel of court-appointed, neutral psychologists, psychiatrists, and more come together to evaluate and each present their opinions, not for a side, but for the pursuit of unbiased truth. On the stand, one of Yoselyn's sisters would blame the Krims for not noticing her sister's deteriorating mental health and grip on reality. She scolded them for not giving Yoselyn a vacation, which would have prevented this tragedy. This in turn produced a resounding gasp from all people in the courtroom and left the Krims quite angered. They would speak out after the trial and say that even now, 5 years after the murders, not one of Yoselyn's family members have reached out to apologize for the loss of their children. Children that the family had met, played with, and held in their very arms. This was not the only shocking moment throughout the trial. Marina at one point was escorted out of the courtroom after exploding and yelling at Yoselyn, quote, "You're evil and you love this. You're getting pleasure from this. Get me out of here, please. Get me out of here." End quote. On the 4th day of trial, one jury member would be dismissed because after reviewing the photos of the children's bodies, they said that they could no longer be fair or impartial. What they witnessed was evil. The jury would be commended for their resilience and determination in enforcing justice through a trial that took such a toll on everybody involved.
This was a very difficult decision for all of us. While the basic facts were very clear from the beginning, we also wanted to be sure that we were giving everybody a fair opportunity. It was not a decision we reached lightly or easily. There were some raised voices and a lot of tears. But I think we all feel good that we addressed all of the issues and fairly weighed everything that was presented to us. Thank you. We treated each other like we wanted to be treated.
Was there a big divide between those that felt that she was from the beginning?
I'm not going to give any numbers, but we were divided at the beginning. And we were divided until the moment we made the decision. I feel like we all feel positive. I mean, it's going to take a while to get over this, but I think we all feel positive. We all felt heard in the room, and we all felt like we were allowed to arrive at our own decisions. I am.
In 2012, Marina and Kevin started the Lulu and Leo Fund, a charitable, non-profit organization that is intended to get children and families to foster creative pursuits and build resilience through the arts. They would say, as the parents of Lulu and Leo, we know that art and nature played a critical role in their short, beautiful lives, and in the life of our surviving daughter Nessie. This is the core purpose of the fund. We believe every child on the planet deserves the deep engagement with art, nature, and creativity that our children had. Our main initiative of the fund is to reflect principles behind the way we lived when the kids were alive. These principles are the foundation of how we were inspired to cope with their loss and how we've begun to thrive again. Their Instagram page for the fund is covered in beautiful creativity, a mixture of works from children they engage with, and tributes to both Lucia and Leo, priceless treasures documented whilst they were alive. Marina says that Ortega did not succeed to destroy what Kevin and I had created and built, an inspired, happy, thriving family. She says that she is determined to appreciate every moment that she had with her children, and is determined to continue to enjoy them as much as she can. This case also managed to introduce a new law in the New York state. It is called Lulu and Leo's Law. In August of 2018, the law establishes the crime of an individual intentionally making a false written statement about themselves or another person while they are being considered for employment, or while under employment as a caregiver of a child or children. In April of 2017, Marina would write an article regarding her feelings about everything that had happened. I'll read it out now. By Marina Krim. 1 minute I was heading over to pick up my daughter Lulu from ballet. The next, I was huddled in the back of an ambulance with my only living child, my 3-year-old daughter Nessie, clinging to my chest. Moments earlier, Nessie and I had walked into the horrifying scene of my 6-year-old daughter Lulu and 2-year-old son Leo dead at the hands of our babysitter. The weeks that followed were surreal. There were terrifying flashbacks, police inquiries, and psychiatrist appointments. There was media attention, an apartment we could never return to, and a memorial service. All of this coupled with the overwhelming grief that always ended in the questions, how did this happen? Why did this happen? In the weeks following Lulu and Leo's death, some magical things happened. I noticed a piece of street art on a construction site, a stencil of a young boy holding a sign filled with colourful hearts. I instantly connected him to Leo. I felt that maybe the universe was trying to tell me something, that it was helping me to realize that there was a beautiful, new relationship waiting to be developed with Lulu and Leo. Over the next few weeks, my senses were awakened. I started noticing other connections. One quiet morning, I was walking along the beach, and the Peanuts theme song, a family favorite that was played at the kids' memorial service, was blasting from a beach house. Another time at the beach, a man was jogging by, and when he reached Nessie and me, he stopped directly in front of me and said, "You and your daughter are extraordinarily beautiful." Surprised, I thanked him and he jogged away. I really loved that simple message from a complete stranger, and wondered if somehow it was being delivered from Lulu and Leo. They showed me that there was still a way to connect with them. It was an approach, inspired by who they were and what they loved. It required creativity, always an important influence in my life. I wanted to teach Nessie that she could approach life and connect with her siblings this way too. On the first Mother's Day after their death, I had an idea. On our last vacation together, Lulu and I had collected dozens of large sand dollars from the beach. I spent this Mother's Day hanging up those sand dollars for display on an empty wall in our apartment. It was a simple way to express myself, feel present, and connect with Lulu and Leo on a really tough day. I'll make a note that I've finished reading the article now. Usually when researching the victims of cases that I've covered in the past, these people exist within words. Words documenting the legacy of that person. These words give us an insight into who that person was and why it hurts so much to lose them. With children, it's quite different. As they're still young, their personalities, although taking shape, are still forming. They don't have decades of life behind them, years where they've carved their mark into the world and people around them. And that's the beauty of children, I suppose. Although having them around is an impact of the most enormous quality, they don't have that edge of whatever life has decided to cut into them yet. They're beautiful little creatures, learning, growing, and most importantly, trusting the adults around them. I imagine that everyone watching right now understands the beauty of this. So instead of reading words that described who they were, I found myself more looking over the pictures that Marina and Kevin have shared with the world. Pictures upon pictures of them smiling, learning, laughing, and experiencing. Just as words may be able to describe the impact that an adult had on the world, in my opinion, pictures can depict the beauty of existing alongside a child better than words would ever be able to. Within these pictures depicts a nurturing that deep down, I like to believe, we all understand to some degree or another. And just as a picture can show absolute beauty, it can also display evil, an evil that broke one jury member, and likely would have broken me as well. For the parents to have this image burned into their mind, not only through a picture, but before their very eyes, is nothing short of strength like no other, that they've been able to move forward with their lives in such a positive manner. And although both parents have and are managing their grief in what seems to be the healthiest way possible, that journey to get to where they are would have been one of the most harrowing paths that a human can walk. Quite often I have many more words at this stage of the video for the victims and their loss, but here I believe the parents themselves to have far more impactful words than I could ever write.
The defendant knows nothing of responsibility or remorse. She should also know nothing of hope. The defendant is an evil and utterly dangerous narcissist and a complete failure. It is right that she should live and rot and die in a concrete and metal cage, like the ugly, dark shadow of Lulu and Leo's bright, shining lights. And more importantly, it is right that she will go from being hated by the world to being forgotten by the world before she's even dead. While Lulu and Leo's siblings and legions of family and friends, even friends who never knew them, will never forget their inspiring legacies. It was one of our top priorities as parents that our kids learned to take care of each other, that they become the best friends for each other, that they realized that no one would ever be more loyal to them than they were to each other. And they were a team. Fights always ended in a sorry and a real hug. A funny thing was how Leo, even when he wasn't involved, would say, "Sorry, Lulu, sorry, Nessie," and give them a hug as well. Lulu had an infectious and innocent energy. She was so enthusiastic about the big and little things, from a fabulous sunset to a perfect snowflake, from a dazzling ballerina's costume to her favorite line in Star Wars. She had fun. And at the same time, she had serenity in her soul that was magnetic. She really was like a little Buddha. Our handsome little Leo saw the world clearly and loved it. He wanted to vacuum it up into his bursting little brain. He was so smart, so curious. He absolutely loved his stroller rides, his front seat view of the streets of Manhattan, soaking up the people, the buildings, the cranes, the trucks, and taxis. He adored trips to the park, to the farm. He was a collector of acorns, toy trucks, balls. Often his biggest worry in life was fitting all his collectibles in his chubby little hands. He loved it when I read him books. He would pick out a big stack of his favorites, always about tractors, farms, trucks, airplanes, and trains, and he'd sucker me into reading 2 or 3 times the number of books I promised. And I'd always leave his room beaming, even if I'd taken too long to put him to bed. We are distraught because Lulu and Leo, these beautiful and innocent souls, were only with us for 6 and 2 years, respectively, blinks of an eye. We are certainly distraught over how they died, over the terrible violence, the lack of any sense of it all. We miss them so, so much. Marina and I already miss the little things the most. We miss picking Leo up out of his crib with a happy mama or dada from him and always a big hug. We miss watching Lulu pick out her own clothes, helping her with a button or a skirt. We miss holding their hands as we walk down the sidewalk. We miss attempting to argue them out of a Mr. Softy cone and losing most of the time. We miss taking little walks through the ramble in Central Park that became great acorn or leaf collecting expeditions. We miss hearing them call out my name and run to hug me when I got home from work. We miss feeling their soft skin in our arms. We have no regrets. But Marina, Nessie, and I believe all of us, are most distraught that we won't have Lulu and Leo with us for the rest of our lives. We are so sad that we won't get to see them grow up. I had simple fantasies of proudly cheering Lulu and Leo on as they became these great people. I didn't care what they did. I knew they'd be great. It is so unfair that they are gone. Unfair to them, unfair to us, unfair to the world. They are gone too soon. In my best moments, I feel Lulu and Leo inspiring me and carrying me forward. In my most difficult moments, I try to ask myself what Lulu and Leo would choose to do. It's the best beacon of hope, the best guidance most of us could ever hope to have. Thank you.
Inez Olivia Krim, the girl who lived. We call her Nessie. She's 9 now. Happy, funny, confident, hard worker, loves school, amazing athlete. Can adapt to any situation you put her in with ease. She's badass. Her 3rd grade teacher emailed me the other day and told me that they're doing a unit on realistic fiction and they get to create a human and believable character. Nessie told me about hers. Her character's in 5th grade. has brown curly hair, and she's a mathematician. And her name is Lulu. Her Lulu character has many siblings, including a brother named Leo. Most of her character, Lulu's traits, likes, and dislikes are similar to those of Nessie's, because Nessie will never know what her sister and brother were like. Each time she makes a wish, it's always for Lulu and Leo to come back to be with us. Nessie knows this wish will never come true. Felix and Linus, born after the murders, never got the chance to meet Lulu and Leo. But I see Lulu and Leo living within all three of the kids every day. Last weekend, Felix sat sobbing on the couch during a sad moment in the movie Coco. I told him later that his sister Lulu had a big heart like him and would cry during sad parts in movies too. Lulu's sensitivity lives alive in Felix. Each time Linus sees a photo of Leo, he instantly says, "me." Deep brown eyes, sandy brown hair, golden brown skin. Sometimes when I look at photos, I have a hard time telling them apart. I still remember how in love I felt when I looked at my first boy's deep brown eyes. Nessie performs a very expressive ice skating routine to the song "Sir Duke" by Stevie Wonder. This was Lulu's favorite song. Each time Nessie steps on the ice, I'm sure Lulu is singing and dancing in the stars alongside her. As Nessie grows up, she will be asking Kevin and me deep, unanswerable questions about life that most parents avoid talking about with their kids. But we will try and answer her questions with sensitivity the best we can. I have no doubt that she will navigate herself through this complicated life with her authentic Nessie spunk. Nessie knows from experience that life is not fair, but she is inspired by Lulu and Leo every day. And way up in the stars, they are inspired by her. My family and I, we create and build. The defendant and her family, they destroy and ruin. The defendant set out to destroy what Kevin and I had created and built. An inspired, happy, thriving family. But she failed. What actually happened is the defendant destroyed her own family. She has destroyed the pride her family once felt. She's destroyed any sense of peace they'll ever have. We have seen the true colors of her and her family members because of this. There's a terrible pattern of terrible judgment. And lying and deceiving people is a way of life for this family. Any shred of dignity the defendant's family had after the murders has been destroyed. Over the past 5.5 years, the defendant has shown not an ounce of remorse. Not a single one of her family members has ever reached out to my family to say, "I'm sorry for your loss." We have heard nothing from this family. Not a letter, no email, nothing. Not a single one of them has said, "I'm sorry." The defendant's son, Jesus Frias, sat in front of a traumatized jury, winking and grinning at the jury members as if it were some kind of reality TV show he wants to win. And under oath, referred to the defendant's actions as an accident. Just to clarify for Jesus, disposing of a cell phone, packing 2 suicide bags the morning of, lurking around the neighborhood for 45 minutes to avoid crossing paths with me, and finally, asking the doorman whether I was home so she could carry out her plan of slaughtering my 2 children. That is not what an accident is. That's delusional. Jesus Frias showed terrible judgment, and there are consequences for making grossly irresponsible statements like this. Jesus says he's applied to 20 medical schools. Jesus Frias hasn't shown he even knows right from wrong, and he's going to be making decisions about other people's lives. That is frightening. The idea that this was an accident is a big problem for me, because this was not an accident. And that word shows that this family still, after 5.5 years, has still not taken responsibility for their roles in these murders. They're still trying to cover up for her and themselves. Sister Celia Ortega, she's the liar who started this whole nightmare, seeking me out, looking me in the eyes, telling me that the defendant was an experienced nanny. Niece Jackie Severino Vargas followed this lie up with a fake recommendation written from her legit work email address. This detailed recommendation convinced us that the defendant had good experience. These unethical women deceived me from the very first moments our paths crossed. Delcy Ortega, she made up absurd stories about the defendant that came out only after she meets their ridiculous defense attorney. Melades Ortega invents phone calls about mashed plantains and blames me for not sending the defendant on a vacation. This entire family continues to lie and deceive their way through this. And look at the so-called lawyers and experts they've surrounded themselves with, disgusting people who seem to have fallen for their lies, or perhaps even added to them. What is wrong with them? The defendant and her family, they destroy and ruin. My family and I, we create and built. After Lulu and Leo died, Kevin and I continued to build our family. We created something special in our home, a home built on creativity, just as Lulu and Leo would have wanted us to do. We went on to create the Lulu and Leo Fund that supports creative education. Lulu and Leo inspire us to choose creativity daily. We are deeply passionate about the impact this can have on the world. We've created a new spiritual relationship with Lulu and Leo. We've shown Nessie and Felix and Linus how to do the same. We've built a deeper bond with each other and have a stronger marriage than ever. We've built stronger friendships. Patiently and with great determination, we rebuilt our lives. My family and I, we create and build. The defendant may think she destroyed Lulu and Leo, but she is a failure in this too. Lulu and Leo are powerful forces. There are two stars now that will always lead